impacts, or yes, there could be potential. And if there were potential impact, it's not getting rid of the project, it's simply saying, okay, you, the developer, you need to go out, you need to do a study, make sure there's no, like, in this case, excess runoff, there's no potential adverse impacts. Even then, that doesn't shoot that project down. The town ultimately has a decision, yes or no. Again, it's simply a review. It's requiring, in some cases, an added layer of review. These are examples of the discretionary decisions. Discretionary decisions are the ones that are related to seeker, or in this case, it's the CEAs. They're decisions where there are choices to be made by the decision makers that determine whether and how an action may be made. So a government body like a town board or whatever agency has the power to approve this project, that's a discretionary decision. Examples of that, I just mentioned the subdivision approval by the town. Anytime, for example, a county's building a new highway, or the town builds a municipal building here, you were supposed to have done a secret review. If nothing else, you'd say, oh, there's no impact, or there could be an impact. If anytime you're adopting new laws, subdivision laws, zoning laws, that is something that decision is subject to secret. And some environmental permits by DEC and some other agencies would be up for seeker if they have to make a decision. If they can say yes or no, and then they have to explain why. All right? The difference is a non-discretionary decision. In a non-discretionary decision, this whole seeker and CEA doesn't even come into play. A non-discretionary decision is a decision made without use of judgment or individual choice on the part of the person or agency making the decision. Examples of that would be a building permit, giving an approval for a septic system. This is how it works. You've got a certain building code or sanitary code. You've got a permit. Does it meet the code? Yes, here's your permit. There's no decision there by the code enforcement person saying, well, I could give you that permit if you did this or that. No, it's yes or no. That type of decision is not subject to seeker. It's not going to come into the CEA, is not even going to come into play. Examples of that would be a building permit for a house. I don't even know in New York if you need a building permit for a dock. Where I'm in New Hampshire, you do. We have really rigid. I'm from New York, but we have a summer camp in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, you can't do anything within 100 feet without getting a permit. You're lucky in New York. Let me just put it that way. Or you have to put a new septic system in, or you have to modify your septic system. Those require a permit, but they're not discretionary decisions. They're not decisions that that environmental review process comes into play. And I have to touch on these because there's a lot. Every community I work in, there's confusion. There's myths and misconceptions, and I have to iron these out. And you can agree with me or disagree with me, but I'm here to give you facts. Fact number one, CEA designation does not create any new rules or regulations or additional permits. I challenge anyone in this room to tell me how a CEA designation would create a new regulation. It does not. It simply does not. So let's think of Guilford. I've heard this. You're going to tell me how I can build my dock. You're going to how I can put an addition on my house. How I can put my septic system in. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I challenge you to find somewhere that says that. You can talk to anybody you want. They're not going to say that. A CEA is simply another, and usually just a little step, in the review process. And most of these decisions that you're talking about are not even relevant to the CEA process. The permits you need for a dock or a building or a septic system. All right. Number two, the CEA designation infringes on my right to own a piece of property and do what I want to do with it. I own a camp. You know, I want to be able to do what I want to do on my camp by the lake. But fortunately, the CEA does not grant any new permitting authority. It's not going to give the town any new authority that it has now. It's not going to create any new jurisdictions by government that don't exist already. So it's not creating another layer of bureaucracy or regulations. And, for example, the quality of life for most homeowners, you won't even know there's a CEA unless you want to go ahead and put in a big subdivision somewhere, in this case the town, and you're in the watershed. They may have to check that box whether it's in the watershed or not. But for most homeowners, you're not going to even, the CEA is simply not going to come into play. Myth 3, CEA designation will prohibit gas drilling. No, absolutely not. All it does, and it's questionable whether it even does this, is that it would alert DEC and, say, a gas company that, oh, here's a watershed that's important to this town. DEC may require that an environmental impact statement be done, but in most of the cases, they won't be doing a site-specific environmental impact statement unless the DEC thinks that there's going to be potential impacts. Because actually the CEA is not actually, I will get to you in a second. The CEA is actually not in the proposed regulations, so it's even questionable whether that will have an impact on it or not. But counties across the southern tier are urging their communities, their towns and villages, to look at what they have, what's important to them, and do CEAs. Because it's a step they can take. It's not costing them anything. It's not impacting their residents. And it's simply another step of review. It's, quite honestly, just another step of review. And if you're a multi-million-dollar company, is that going to be a huge deal for you? Probably not, but it would give peace of mind to local residents. Another thing that's important to note is a CEA boundary is totally at the discretion of the board making that boundary. I've seen some crazy boundaries, quite honestly. Here's an example. I mapped the watershed of Guilford Lake. Pretty small watershed. Especially if you look at the whole town. It's a pretty small area of the town. Here's a CEA that would include the entire watershed, including the lake. But here's one that would not include the lake, and it would include the shoreline. You can do that. You can say, well, we just want to include, this part of the watershed or that part of the watershed. I've seen some strange CEA designations. I've seen whole villages as a CEA. I've seen, only particular areas that honestly don't have a lot of justification. But that's the beauty of CEA, it is a local, it's what's important to the community. And if that, you can draw the boundaries. It's a process, you draw the boundaries up. I could go into the process, but it's a pretty simple process. You draw up the area, you have public notifications, you have public hearing, like we had a public hearing tonight. You pass a resolution, you send the paperwork on to DEC, and hopefully they update their website someday and put that on there. But that's the process. So final thoughts, and then I'm sure there'll be questions. The CEA designation is a positive step to promote awareness and education about important local resources. That's what I try to stress with places. It's an awareness. It's all it is. It's like education. You're just trying to make people aware. You may have seen signs, you're going along, you say, you're now on this watershed, or you're not. It's just awareness. It's making decision makers aware of where the watershed is, for example. It's making residents aware This is where my drinking water comes from. This is where, you know, where the water that is my lake, that's, you know, that's what's feeding me. Individual landowners are not negatively impacted by, say, CEA designation. I would argue that most don't even know there is this, they live in the CEA. I could go and talk with the ones that I've worked on, it hasn't impacted them at all, and that's a good thing, right? They didn't want impacts in their area. Oops, and like I said, a lot of counties, I should say, are urging their local communities to designate CEAs. For example, Tioga County, Schuyler County, areas that quite honestly are more productive in terms of natural gas drilling, that probably going to see a bigger impact potentially. They're urging their communities to inventory CEAs. Yeah, it is a time because of natural gas, but what's the next thing that's going to come? And so it's not a new tool. It's been out there for decades. It's just another way for communities to protect what's important to them. And I have I prepared a list of what I call frequently asked questions, and I'll distribute that to the board.